Okay, could we all stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Daly?
Here.
Vice President Hedlund?
Here.
Trustee Clements?
Here.
Trustee McNowell?
Here.
And Trustee Parr?
Here. Okay, welcome everyone. I'll mention two things. The first is that our next Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, September 3rd. That is the first day after Labor Day. The students don't come back till the Wednesday, but the teachers will be back on the 3rd, and we will be back on the 3rd as well. The other thing I'll share is that the board will be convening into our retreat later today after this meeting. It's a opportunity for us to work together. It's basically professional development time for the school board. It's also fun time to be together. So we'll be doing that after this meeting at the VFW hall. And I'll turn it, oh no, I'm not turning it over to you. The next thing we're going to do is talk about the Code of Conduct. So what I'd like to do is open up the public hearing for the Code of Conduct. And that means that anybody who has any comments about the Code of Conduct, now's a good time to share them. The Code of Conduct is a document that the board and the district reviews annually. It lives on our website. It has been it's living on our board docs, correct? It's the current version is on board docs for anyone to look at. Once it's been approved, it will live on our website as well. And it's a living, breathing document that we work on constantly to make sure that it's fulfilling the needs that it needs to. So I'll just open it up now for comments from the public, and then if Dr. Benante or Ms. Sniffen would like to chime in along the way, please do. So maybe you would like to start.
Sure. I'll just say a few words. Based on feedback provided by the Board of Education last year when the board adopted the Code of Conduct, the document underwent significant revisions over the course of this school year. That was led by Mrs. Sniffen as well as members of the Code of Conduct Committee. I think what we acknowledged was that the document had gone through continual updates, probably spanning many years. We'll just leave it at that. So over time, there were a lot of issues with consistency in language, voice, some formatting issues as well with the document that needed to be addressed. So we took the best of what was the old plan and incorporated, or essentially did a complete rewrite of the plan for this school year, and ideally we'll work off of that moving forward. So it was rather laborious. I know Mrs. Sniffen was actively meeting with the committee each month. She also was working with our legal counsel to make sure that the Code of Conduct had all of its required components. I had a chance to go through the document extensively with Mrs. Sniffen as well, and that's reflected in the document now that is before you for adoption. We did have parent members as part of the review, as well as staff members as well, and administration, of course, with Mrs. Sniffen's facilitation. So we do feel that the document is much more polished than what we had in the past.
Thank you, Dr. Benante. What I would also just, for the sake of the meeting, I do have to personally thank a few people. The amount of hours in all of my years here, I think more hours went into this document over this year than any other document I've been part of writing. And I need to thank Sue Spratt, Nancy Martinez. I need to thank Megan Shields. We probably had 6 or 7 different versions of this document that we were working off of as we were putting this together. But most importantly, Damian McDonald, who does a lot of work on policy writing. So he was a tremendous asset to our group And I cannot even begin to count the number of hours that Damien sat with us and went through it as well. So I just want to thank all of them. Yep, you'll see there are definitely some changes if you look at the code of conduct that's up now versus the one that you see in front of you. I think it's cleaner. There's one voice. It's streamlined a lot of information. It doesn't contradict itself throughout the document. We found so many contradictions. As we were reading it, it was embarrassing at different times. So I feel good about the document in front of you right now. I think it's a working document that people will refer to, especially administratively. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I think, the fact that a lot of hours went into it, I think is really apparent. The document reads really well. It's extraordinarily clear. The language is very accessible. I really appreciated in my reading of it the inclusiveness, right? Repeatedly throughout the document, there's no way one could come away from that document and not recognize that the district is committed to equity, equal treatment of all students, pretty much regardless, everything except for, and even equal treatment of the students who may engage in inappropriate behavior. But if they engage in inappropriate behavior, they'll be treated like any other student who does. I think the document reflects so positively on the district, and so really do appreciate what clearly was a lot of work.
Yeah, and on that, I really appreciate the inclusion of the language that refers to the Dignity for All Students Act, because I think if you don't know what that is, you don't know to refer to it, because there's so much that you can find that's available to the public on government websites. And also, I know the question of how do we, as a district, think about disciplining students in off-campus situations that may affect us, and I think there's a great clarification in there as to what the scope of our ability to discipline is, and also good reference for us if a parent comes to us and has something that's on their mind. So I appreciate those two things in particular.
And there's a real emphasis on context, which I think comes up a lot. Some parents really look for if this, then that, if this, then that. And although there is something very nice about that, and that you just know exactly what's going to happen, there's a lot more to it than that, and we all know that as educators, and I appreciate that was emphasized, that there certainly will be discipline, it will be appropriate, it will be with compassion, but it will also be within appropriate context, and I think that's really important, and so I appreciate that. Margaret, please share. Margaret's been our board connection to the Code of Conduct Committee for, 4 years now.
Yeah, but the meetings
And
were
the
always at
parents
like
before
3:30,
that.
so I haven't been able to come. So I've been kind of watching these things go through. So this is huge, how different it is. It reads incredibly well. I didn't know Damien was the one at the other end, but it shows. It clearly shows. But again, I am the if this, then that. I am a firm believer in how does a child make a decision on whether or not they're going to break a rule if they don't know what the consequences are at the other end. And I see one of the biggest changes here is that all of the consequences were eliminated. So that now leaves it up to the administration, the teachers, whoever it is in that chart that is allowed to discipline at that various point.
Right.
In this situation, I completely trust you, it's fine, but you're not always going to be here. So this has always been my beef. It's been my beef from the beginning. This is 1,000 times better than it was 6 months ago. But I would still want to put my piece in that I feel like kids need to know what the consequences are before they go in so they can make a valid decision, because this kid might be an honor student and makes that decision, and this kid might be a kid that's been in trouble before, and it's all based on the decision of the superintendent, the principal, the teacher to say, all right, this is what I think is valid at this time, and they have no guidelines to make that decision on. I'm not going to say I'm not going to approve this, but I'm going to say that it will always be my beef and has been my beef since my kids were little kids.
That's a common concern that we hear from community members when dealing with codes of conduct. And I use an example that I encountered as a building principal for why sometimes the clear articulation of what the disposition will be or what discipline will be administered if a situation occurs is difficult and creates obstacles for the administration when determining discipline. For example, I was a building administrator of an elementary school as a principal when the code of conduct clearly established that were a student to bring a weapon to school, they would be suspended for school for 5 days, referred to a superintendent's hearing, and potentially suspended for up to a year. I had a first grade student who packed his lunch that day and had an apple in his lunchbox and also put a knife in the lunchbox with it to cut the apple at lunch. He was getting his lunch ready himself that day. And if we were to go by the letter of the law, that student brought a weapon to school that day. Now, he was 6 or 7 years old, and I don't think anybody would argue that he had no intention to cause any harm to anybody else on that day in school. But the code of conduct articulated that, if this, then that. So that's where I say, and Jen used the correct term, context matters, right? I think, also at the elementary level, it's not uncommon especially for our little ones at kindergarten and first grade who are learning about boundaries and whatnot. And, a first grader hitting another student is different than an 18-year-old hitting another student. So we have to be wary of that. But your point's well noted, and that's where I think trust comes into play, Margaret, and I know you alluded to it, and I appreciate the comments about your trust in the administration currently, and were that to change over the years, that's why we review the document every year, and that's why we have a code of conduct hearing each year, that if the board really felt that there was a need to reincorporate such a table or a chart that you're referring to in the last one back into the document. I think that's something that obviously may be appropriate. But I think for right now, that could also bind us in situations when we may not want to be, where we may not want to be bound with those hard and fast rules or dispositions when discipline arises. So I think the language articulates that well. And obviously, as incidents come up, because there will be incidents, we're going to do our best to make sure we strike the right community balance when situations occur. I was thinking about this last year, Julia, and remind me, we had 2, I believe, quite serious disciplinary infractions last school year that required disciplinary hearings that you and I were a part of. And I'd like to think, I was reflecting upon those and the discipline that we administered, and perhaps most importantly, we addressed both incidents with, I think, very firm discipline, but more importantly, it didn't happen again. So we have to take in consideration the relationship we have with the family when dealing with students of serious discipline who have serious disciplinary incidents that occur on campus, the other community-based resources that may be available to support that child and their family as they're learning through that process. We have a responsibility to discipline. Absolutely, and we certainly did in those cases. But I think we've also demonstrated, most importantly, that the students learned from it and it didn't happen again on our campus. So that's the sweet spot we want to maintain here as we're disciplining kids, but also keeping in mind we're also teaching them and we're working with their families because we have their long-term interests as community members in mind.
I didn't catch it, but it may be here. Does this allude that it also includes the athletic extracurricular code of conduct? Or do we pull that, it references it? So are we approving today this and that? Just this. So are we approving the other later in another meeting?
Speak to that.
So is that one being adjusted to undo the consequences?
So that one, it's slightly different. That's still the same in regards to the infraction, right? So extracurricular is a privilege to be part of, right? So as it relates to disciplinary, that's different than classroom, suspension, that kind of stuff. So that's not changing. That's still that same document that we have in regards to infractions of violations of the code of conduct as it relates to extracurricular activities. So that hasn't been adjusted. The other piece that you should have gotten a copy of is just the synopsis of the code of conduct, which is the piece that we go over in detail with the students. So that's the second document you have.
So are we approving the athletic extracurricular every year? Or is
I don't know that that's an approved one. The code of
Because
conduct.
this approves that in conjunction with
Correct.
it.
It's the athletic and extracurricular
It's a handbook.
code of conduct is an extension of our district code of conduct with language specific to students' participation in extracurricular or athletic activities.
So
And that has not changed.
that has not changed.
We
So
did
by
not discuss
approving
that.
this, we're approving that as it stands.
Correct.
So we don't pull out the handbook. But we don't pull it out for approval every year.
We did, because it was new.
But we don't do it every year as practice.
It was new. It was new. So it was new last year, right?
No, it was new 2 years ago.
2
Right.
years ago. So
we approved it when it was new, but we don't pull it out to approve every year.
we did. We approved it with this at the same time last year.
I would say that if it is in the board would like to review that document and act upon it, we can certainly
Well, if
make
it hasn't changed, I don't care. I just want to know approving this is approving that.
I believe so, yes. Approving that, that's what's most important, is our code of conduct, which has application to extracurricular and athletic activities as well. I believe the athletic and extracurricular activity code / handbook simply rearticulates much of, if not all, of what's in there. It's just making more explicit the fact that if you're engaged in athletics or extracurriculars and there is a disciplinary incident, you will be held to the same standard of conduct that's articulated in our district code of conduct.
But there's very specific
There
consequences.
is a little bit more of a if then that
Correct.
in the extracurricular, as again, that is, a privilege to be part of.
Right.
And so it is a little bit more specific to the if then this. Yes.
Right, games suspended,
Right.
the equation of that, because obviously length of season is relevant to the sport, are all articulated there, which we would use as guidance if and when such incidents were to occur.
Okay.
I'll just ask a quick question. You started to allude to it, so obviously a lot of work went into this. Thank you, everyone who participated. The document's refreshed and reinvigorated. Two things. One, a procedural thing. I think that going forward, if the athletic code of conduct is subsection extracurricular code of conduct is indeed a portion of, we should probably just review it all every year as portion. If it's not a code of conduct and a separate document, then it's different. So we should just make a decision as to what it is. But second, you alluded to sort of the summary that gets distributed and shared and with students. So my question was going to be, lots of work, lots of great content. How has it become part of the entire ethos of the school and community?
So a few things that we do over the course of the year, right, to make this document kind of come alive. I think you've all alluded to the fact, right, the goal isn't to look at a code of conduct and just say this is a punitive document of consequence. It's really to talk about the culture we want here, how we operate as a learning community. So a few of the things that we do, right, we try to find different, whether it's literature, whether it's, how we treat one another in classrooms. There's a lot of it that's organic and natural that happens within the classroom. However, there is then at the beginning of the school year, I go into every English class in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, and I do the government class in the 12th grade with Miss Seidman. We go through the expectations. We go through my expectations. At times, I feel like it's a little bit harsh and direct, but it's kind of what needs to happen in that environment. So I have a presentation that I share with them, but we also have some nice video clips in there about how we treat one another, why we treat one another that way, to kind of liven it up a little bit rather than just the consequence. The synopsis is very to the point, that we go over with the students, and it's what's really relevant to them. Like, we're not getting into the coding of attendance, but we're talking about you need to be in class, and if you're not in class, there will be consequences, and this is the range of consequences that typically will happen if you're not or you're late. So,
And is it shared similarly, sort of in an age-appropriate way in middle school or even elementary school?
I can't speak to exactly how they're doing it now, but by law, we do need to share with each student, and they need to acknowledge that they or the families have an understanding of this. So our summer mailing has not gone out yet, as many of you parents probably know. We are waiting for today's meeting because this document needs to be included in the summer mailing, and we were waiting to do so.
Okay. Great.
So it will be shared with all families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board, from the public? Okay, I think we can close the public hearing for the Code of Conduct. Thank you. We're going to move into comments from Dr. Benante.
Thank you, Ms. Staley, and welcome to all of our audience members and to our Board of Education. It's been a busy month since the last time we met. I'm obviously looking forward to the retreat this evening, but I have several items to update you on for matters that have occurred over the course of the last 4 weeks or so. The first, unfortunately, we received notice from Pearson, which is an educational resource entity company, that there was a breach of data in a product called Ames Web, which we utilized between 2011 and 2016. So we used it for a period of 5 years. Ames Web is a product that provides assessment information, it's a computer-based assessment that's administered to students that provide us with information about their reading and their mathematics growth. It's very similar to the NWEA assessments that we currently administer, although this was the product that we were utilizing for a period of time again several years ago. We believe that Pearson has notified us that the student information that was potentially accessed by an outside party was limited to student names and date of birth. So comparatively, we can load a lot of information into these systems. We limited the information we loaded into the system at the time to student names and date of birth. So it was limited to just that, which I believe is good news compared to what some other districts may have loaded into their Ames Web database. We took the steps today to send a notice out to all families. So we believe current students who are in 4th grade through 12th grade potentially were impacted. So we sent a letter to those families via the K-12 notification system. Actually, we did that yesterday evening via email, and we're in the process of identifying the students who have since graduated to notify them that their families that this specific information may have been included. And lastly, Pearson has indicated that for families who have been impacted, that they will provide identity protection services for up to a year, but families will have to call and set that up through them. And the number is included in the notice that I sent home to families yesterday. It's important to note this breach occurred at Pearson. It did not occur here at Haldane. It wasn't a part of our systems. Our systems were not compromised. But this is unfortunately sometimes what occurs when we're working with web-based services such as these. So that's where we're at currently with that. Margaret?
When did that happen?
We believe Pearson notified us that the breach occurred in November. However, they determined that, and I don't know all the specifics to how this works, they did not discover that the breach occurred until just recently, in August of this year. So I believe through some sort of forensic analysis that they conduct, they can see that they had a breach of their system in November of 2018.
Thank you.
It's interesting to note that something that we stopped using 4 years ago still
Correct.
retains the data on our
Yes.
student, right?
Yeah.
So that's always fun.
Yeah. And I believe now we're much more vigilant as we work with entities such as these about what specific information is housed and how long is it warehoused
Right.
after
What's
the
our contract?
after the relationship ceases. However, this is one obviously we had separated our engagement with them 3 years ago, and I don't know if that's something we ever went back to.
Just as a random question for the CIO. No, kidding. Do we have understanding of all vendors, contractors that have or have had data on administrators, staff, students, either internally or externally?
We do now, so I want to make sure I answer this
Okay,
clearly,
sorry.
so please
It
probe.
wasn't a
If
very clear question, so,
any current entity that we're engaging with, yes.
okay,
I don't know if we can say that
Correct.
for, yes,
Okay.
historical.
okay.
Relationships.
And we know the data that they have.
Correct.
We have
It's part of the
terms
agreement.
in the agreement as
Yes.
to storage and
Maintenance,
use. And, okay,
yep.
got it. All right. Great, thank you.
Okay, on that one. I want to let the board know, as we discussed this last year, we are proceeding with our strategic coherence planning. Invitations have been issued to members of the community to participate in that process. There will also be multiple opportunities for community members to participate via an online survey. We're going to talk a little bit more about this at the retreat this afternoon, but I just wanted to let you know that things were proceeding as planned with that, and I believe there'll be a number of updates, if not at each meeting, but on a fairly consistent basis throughout the fall and early winter about the coherence planning process and how that is taking shape. So it's just something to keep on our agenda. Over the last 2 months, we've had difficulty filling the behaviorist position, and I just wanted to make the board aware of that. Mrs. Rounds facilitated a search process. We had a number of very well-qualified candidates. However, unfortunately, as we were at the point of making offers to these candidates, there was a difference. Many had prior experience, and there was a difference between their salary expectations and what we had budgeted for the position. So currently, right now, Mrs. Rounds has reposted the position, and we anticipate continuing to interview on a rolling basis, unless the district were at a point, which could happen over the next month, where we realize that we may be in a position to raise the salary for the position, or what we could offer a salary for the position as we get into the school year. We may re-examine prior applicants and whether or not we can come to terms in that way.
Can we go back to before you move on, can we go back to the previous strategic coherence planning?
Sure.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make something clear to the public that's watching that I know that I don't think was clear in your remarks, because you said invitations have gone out to community members to be part of
The strategic coherence planning process, and then you said, and community members will have multiple opportunities to participate.
Sure.
And I just want to clarify
Sure. So
that specific members of the community have been invited to
Correct.
be part of the strategic
correct.
planning process, which and a lot of thought went into doing that on the part of you and others, and that group is set, but that people that aren't part of that group, that there will be multiple opportunities. I mean, plus, and I don't want to speak for you, but, and I hope this clarification is okay, but your door is also, the doors of many administrators throughout the district are open if people have comments they want to make. I mean, I think this was a big deal. This is a process that's very different than the way that we did it last year.
Sure.
I think, not last year, but last time. That process was big. I think it might have been kind of unwieldy. It's a huge commitment of time, one that many people weren't able to make, which doesn't lend to a coherent process. And given that this is strategic coherence planning, it's really important to have folks who really understand what they're getting into. And anyway, because I know this is going to be important to the community, I know there's some dissatisfaction in some ways, and maybe with what emerged from the last. And so I did think it was a topic that folks might want a little bit more information about.
No, everything you said is accurate. And to provide just some further background on how we approached it, Jonathan Costa, who's the facilitator for the process, is quite adamant, because he's very familiar with traditional strategic planning processes, that he doesn't want the room to be too big, for lack of a better term, with the specific group that's working with him, the coherence planning team, throughout the course of the year. So he's asked that we try to limit that to 15 to 20 community members. So I met with the building leadership, or the district leadership. I also met with Jen, and we talked through which community members internally and externally would be good liaisons between the Coherence planning team and the community at large. If people had questions or comments or input that they wanted to provide. So we've tried to really strike a right balance there. But also within Jonathan's planning process, he uses a particular web-based tool that they have as part of his organization. It's proprietary, to engage the community at various points for feedback, to provide back to the planning team to work with through the planning process. So at some point, Jonathan will be part of a presentation to the board, and he certainly will explain all of this to our Board of Education, but I can understand the board's or Peggy's point, and why community members may want to know what steps are actually going into the creation of this team. And we've had confirmations from most of the folks who invitations have been extended to. We're still waiting to hear back from a couple. I know the time of the year folks are away and probably just getting back. So,
I mean, it's an approach that we've used with some of our bigger interview processes, where there's a very strategic
yes.
decisions made to ensure that the community is well represented. Not
Correct.
that everybody's there, but the community as a whole is represented. But then opening up, providing other venues for as many people as possible to make
Correct.
comments. And I think that's worked really well for us. It worked well for the Superintendent Search, I think. Not that we don't learn lessons from every search that we do, but it reflects a move that we've made with you over the past,
Yep.
with your guidance over the past year, and it's a move I think I speak for the board, but I believe that we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I mean, Jen obviously is, because she went along, she went along with it.
No, I am. I had all the same questions you did, actually. When I read your email about your questions, I'm like, I asked all of these exact questions. But I think it makes a lot of sense to pare it down a bit, to focus the group, and to then branch out and get all the other feedback. And the Superintendent Search was exactly what I was thinking of as well, because that is pretty much what we did, right? We had these committees of interview committees of teachers, administrators, faculty members, and then of parents. And those committees, we tried to select a broad cross-section of people who broadly represent the community, but who are also willing to make the commitment, because it certainly is a time commitment. And that, I think that does work well. So I don't know. I think it'll be a good process, but we'll see, and it we'll be updated on it along the way. That we're really just in the beginning phases of it. But I would also like to mention that last time around, we never called it a coherence planning. It was always called the strategic plan. And so, just so nobody's confused at home, this is creating the strategic plan. This is our strategic coherent plan. Just slightly different name.
We're going to talk more. I think we're going to have some good conversations around this throughout the course of the fall and winter. One thing I also wanted to mention, Peggy alluded to this, and I wasn't here obviously when the last plan was created, and I think there was a lot of good work that came out of the last planning process, and we want to hold on to the best of that, obviously. But as far as process is concerned, it was a more there was broader participation as part of the planning team. But what I heard was that participation dwindled throughout the course of the process. And the only thing that concerns me with that is you want the folks who are engaged, you want whoever's involved in the process to be engaged fully throughout it, because they really become the stewards of that work going out into whatever happens next. So if we only have people who are kind of halfway committed, whatnot, that we lose some potential to create momentum behind whatever the plan is, and that's something that obviously Jonathan is attuned to, as I am as well. I've been a part of other processes in the past, and I want to make sure that this group is set up to really carry that work forward with whatever constituencies they may be a part of. Good there? Okay, moving along. I did want to note that there are 2 items on the agenda this evening. The first is the appointment of a new school psychologist. And if you recall, as we all know, Tara was moving from the school psychologist role last school year into the director role this school year, so we had to backfill Tara's position. But there's also a recommendation to appoint CSE CPSE chair separately. So in the past, Tara carried both of these responsibilities. She was the school psychologist, and she was also the CPSE chairperson. Through the search process, we found that we had a very good candidate for the school psychologist role. However, that candidate was just out of program. So there was a bit of reluctance to have that person carry the CPSE chairperson responsibilities, because that's a big undertaking. But yet we had Dawn Rosano, who's an experienced school psychologist, who is better positioned, we feel, to take on the CPSE chairperson responsibilities moving forward. So you will see two separate action items, actually three. One is the appointment of a school psychologist. The second is the appointment, the increase of Dawn's appointment from a 0.5 to a 0.6 assignment for the upcoming school year, and then her appointment as the CPSE chairperson. We do feel that Dawn's assignment needs to be slightly increased to accommodate for the transition from some of her cases to what hopefully will be Nicole's cases in the coming months, and then also to assume the CPSE chairperson responsibilities. So that's how we're recommending we proceed with these positions. I do want to welcome Nicole Snook, who's in the audience this afternoon, who's on our agenda later on. So we'll hopefully share some good vibes with her in a couple of minutes here. And Nicole is here with her mother, Eileen Snook. And I'll have more comments about Eileen Snook in a few minutes, because I know Eileen, and I have some good comments there. So we'll get to that in a few minutes.
And Dr. Benante, so just to round out our mental health team here, the behaviorist position is not currently filled because we couldn't quite find the right candidate.
Yep.
But we're continuing with working with BOCES,
yes.
right?
Yes,
So those services are still.
Right, thank you. So we're not going to, the students who require behaviorist support on campus will continue to be supported in the fall through our contracted service with BOCES, which is what we have always done. If you recall, just as a reminder, we do spend quite a bit of money on those contracted services, which is why we wanted to have our own person come in, and it would also give us a little more flexibility with the use of behaviorists as compared to what we're currently getting. But we'll proceed as we have until there's a point where we feel we can bring our own person on board. Okay, moving along. Just a note to our board members that you may have been reading about the new immunization requirements. It's become quite prominent in the news, or was, kind of going back and forth in news coverage on that. We have been in touch with most, if not all, of our families by now who are impacted by the new immunization requirements. We believe we have close to 23 students who are impacted. And again, as of last week, I believe 22 were on the path towards being ready to go for this school year. I think there was one that was still potentially deliberating on whether or not they were going to make that choice to have their child immunized. But we have been active in our communication with those families. Ms. O'Hara has been wonderful in reaching out to those families. You would have received a notice today if you've been checking your email from the from our council regarding the medical students who may potentially be medically exempt and the requirements there. That was all information that we were already attuned to in working with families from a couple of weeks ago. So between our communication with the Department of Health, with our legal counsel, we feel we're in a good place with this, and our families have been supported as they're taking steps to make sure their children can start. It's not so much to start school, but remain in school if they start this school year, because there is a 14-day window that they have to be in compliance.
And just a policy committee note on this. I asked Dr. Benante if we needed to put new policy in this regard, and we do, but the law supersedes our policy anyway. Right. So we're covered because the law has been created. That is what we're following. But on the agenda for the policy committee sometime soon will be to put policy officially in place.
Policy in the bullpen, right?
On deck.
On deck. That's probably a better term. couple others here, two of which are not on my comments, or were not on my comments. First, I wanted to mention that Judy Barbera is the individual we're contracting with through Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES to provide curriculum support for this school year. Judy has begun with us this week. She was very active in her participation at in our work at the administrators retreat, leading a session for our administrators. She will be here. We anticipate her being here Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and half-day Thursdays throughout the course of the school year. And I know there'll be a time where Judy will attending our Board of Education meetings. You'll have an opportunity to meet her directly, but I'm really pleased to have her support on campus this year already. Two last items. I wanted to let the board know the elementary bathroom renovations are on time. Not yet done. One more day of work probably. They'll be back next week. If you get a chance, we'll do a walkthrough at some point in the fall, so you'll see the bathrooms. You're guaranteed to see the bathrooms. But I can say, as of right now, our elementary students have the nicest bathrooms on this campus, without a doubt. They are nice bathrooms. They deserve it, sure. I hope they stay that clean and that nice. I love the tile. I love the accents. It's wonderful. So we'll take a picture at the very least and show it at our next board meeting because they'll be done by then. But those are nice bathrooms. Let's see. One last thing from me, and thank you. I know since there's been some time since we met, my comments are running a little longer than they usually do. Ann and I, over the last few months, have been examining other structures. Whenever we have an open administrative position, it's an opportunity just to take a step back and examine whether or not does that position as it's listed best meet the needs of our school district right now. So as the director of facilities position is open, we were having this conversation with each other. And we really sat with it for quite some time. And jokingly, I say, Ann makes such a great director of facilities in addition to business official. Maybe we don't need a director of facilities because Ann's doing such a great job. But kidding aside, we were looking at other anticipated work, other anticipated needs, and we were really struggling to find a title that would, while still meeting the day-to-day facilities needs, would meet some of the other needs that we have or we see we have on campus in a kind of quasi-administrative role. So in sitting with this, we resolved to feeling that we need a director of facilities. We had some creative avenues we were thinking of exploring, but we felt it would really create an issue with civil service, and we didn't want to go down that road. We don't want to create issues with civil service at all. So we're back to, okay, we need a director of facilities, but we do feel that we could, as with any position, perhaps, we could generate broader interest in the position by increasing the salary range to between $105,000 and $115,000. The previous salary range we posted at, I believe, was between $85,000 and $95,000. So we were looking for the board's feedback and on that, were we to proceed. So we have not posted the position yet because we wanted to have this conversation with the board. Ann says we can afford it, so I trust her judgment there. I do believe that as I look at other salaries throughout the county and region, they're higher than that for sitting directors. But I do believe that salary range would draw the interest for a variety of reasons. People apply for jobs sometimes because of location, proximity to their home, advancement. We do think that would draw some interest from within the region for those reasons as well. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Does the board have any initial thoughts? Is that something you guys kind of want to sit with?
I mean, we know when we conducted the search last time that many of the people, right, that were at the top of the list, right, were required to refer to a list of folks who've taken and passed the exam and obtained particular scores. That a number of people on the list declined to apply for the job. One can assume, I think pretty safely, that one of the mitigating factors, would be salary. And so, just to reiterate what Dr. Benante said, I mean, I think that makes sense. It's a challenge. I mean, not like an impossibly challenging position, but it's an interesting position in that you've got
transportation, you've got the day-to-day maintenance, we have a buildings and grounds staff that's always, I think, done a good job of bringing a wide variety of skills to do repair. So it's the day-to-day maintenance, can be fixing things. I mean, it requires a lot of expertise. I mean, actually, one of the things we know about the economy right now is that jobs that require that kind of technical expertise, it's very hard. It's hard to fill them, And I think increasing the salary, could help. And we want a good person, so I think it's important. I'm fine with it.
I think just very specifically, given the fact that we've got a bond coming up that we're going to need to manage, I'd be much happier spending $20,000 to make sure that goes well than whatever $100,000 if it doesn't go well. To get the right person in to do that job. Sorry.
Are we committed to that one title on the list, or can we juggle the titles a little bit and look at multiple lists?
I think and Ann, please feel free to chime in, as we were looking at various lists, we were struggling to find a title that met our day-to-day needs on the facilities end, and then also addressed other areas that we felt were relevant and should be considered without creating an issue. And I don't know if you have any more comments you want to provide. You were obviously very active in that examination.
Right. The job description is very specific for Director of Facilities, and it is really on what we need. So trying to change it in a way could just basically be rejected by civil service, because we would have to submit the qualifications and the job duties of the person we're looking for, wait for them to assign a title to it, which most of the other titles that used to be active are not anymore, because they're swept into Director of Facilities
Right.
now.
So we're committed. We're approved to take this one title from the list, and with varying from that, we start getting into pulling other titles, and then it has to get approved, and we could appoint someone. They could not score the top three, and we're caught in that mess.
Which we don't want to be.
No, absolutely not.
You
So
know,
it's one title. That's what we're going from.
Yeah.
Right. It's different levels. Director of Facilities is a statewide list now. It's not even, you can't even pull a local list. There's over 300 names on the list. So when we start canvassing, we have to canvass statewide, and we have to get a lot of rejections from people that, could be in Buffalo, and they're not going to move.
Never.
So, we have a lot to sort through, and
Got it.
it's like 325 names.
And I think last year we were up to 200 canvassed, if I'm not mistaken. So it's an extensive process to just get at a group who are interested.
And is that list due to expire anytime soon? Like, we're not going to get caught in that, or are we?
It's new this year.
It's new.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's helpful as
Yeah.
well, because the last time it was on its last year, and now it's on its first year. So
Got it.
that makes
All
a
right.
difference.
How often do they renew it?
I think it's every 3.
Every 3 years?
But they can change that at any time.
And with civil service, you post a salary range. Is that correct? Like, you post that it's 105 to 115, say, and
Right.
then you can't really deviate from that range.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Not once we.
Once you have to.
You'd have to repost.
You'd have to
again
repost.
And give
Right.
everyone an opportunity, because some people say no because of the salary.
Right.
And if you change the range, then they say, hey, wait, I would have
Right.
applied. So.
And just so I understand the mechanics here, in looking for another title, there are a series of titles that are available that come with a specified set of functions and activities that person needs to roll. So some of them may get paid less, but in what we need and the functions we need for the district, the functions that we need appropriately align to a Director of Facilities title. So therefore, that's the exercise that you went through, was to try to say, can we portion out some of these other responsibilities and leave someone, get to a different title, but that basically didn't work. Is that?
Right. So as an example, you were attuned to the upcoming bond work. So one of the titles we examined was project manager, right? Maybe there's some other things there, right? But I'd liken the director of facilities role and responsibilities to that of CIO in some ways. There are so many specific tasks that we are now required to complete, or a director of facilities is required to complete, similar to like a CIO, monthly responsibilities that are totally aligned with the director of facilities title, that when we look at the scope of work on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, 80% of it is outlined as director of facility work. So it's hard to justify how another title would do those things. It's impossible to justify that. So.
Thank you.
And then they break that director of facilities down into director of facilities 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
And it depends on the size of the district and how many people they supervise. So it's very focused.
Thank you.
Are the same people on those lists? Do you take those tests at the same
They
time?
would have had, no, not necessarily. However, if I'm not mistaken, Ann, so the list is folks who took the test the last time. But that doesn't close out someone who's in a sitting director of facilities role, because we would also post the position from applying. So they can apply as well.
So if they're already hired and they're not on the list, they can apply and get that transferred in?
Right.
Yes, there's that opportunity, which is why we would post outside of canvassing the list, because you are eligible if we need a director of facilities 2. If you're a 2 and a 3, I think it is, then you can transfer into our district, not being on the list because you're already in the position. Should you be a successful candidate and a fit for us.
So at that point, their score doesn't matter because they've already been hired.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And we're only hiring for 1, 2, or 3, whichever one we are.
We're posted at 2.
We're number 2.
We're 2.
We're 2.
We're number 2.
So, okay with
So
that?
we get it? Are we kind of feeling like a thumbs up for the increase?
Great.
Yes? Yeah. Okay.
All right.
You have our blessing.
I do want to, just in closing, thank Ann. I say it jokingly, and I know I said it before about Ann being our director of facilities, but it's important to know Ann is managing the day-to-day facilities and transportation matters on campus, and has for the entirety of the summer, and has done a fantastic job. She's meeting with the team weekly. Our folks have been active on campus. I think you see that and have seen that throughout the summer, reflected in the work that's gone on inside of the buildings and outside of the buildings on our grounds. So, Ann, again, just thanks to you for picking this up in our time here, and we'll hope to have a director of facilities sometime this fall. So we'll post the position tomorrow at this point. Okay, and that concludes my remarks.
Okay, is there any communication from the public? And we will keep going along here. Our information reports are here for the board to look at. Going into consent agenda minutes, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
These are the minutes from the July 5th annual reorganization meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda financial, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
There's a couple of items here that I think Dr. Benante is going to talk about. There's a lot here. We're going to talk about EduTech, and then I think you also wanted to talk about number 16, milk.
Got it. Yeah. First, I just wanted to mention about the EduTech proposal. There are a few matters related to that, and we discussed. First of all, we discussed through the budget process last year budgeting for full-time level 1 systems engineer support. As opposed to as compared to what we currently had, which was part-time support in a position like that. So that was supported by the Board of Education and then ultimately our community. So we put that work out to bid, and Ann managed the bidding process for that. And EduTech, which is an entity we've worked with in the past, had the successful bid, or the one we're recommending to move forward with for that level 1 support. One thing I want to point out with this contract is that if the district were to encounter any work that required advanced levels of support moving forward, that is included in the contract at no additional cost to the district. So if we had something that required level 2 or level 3 systems engineer support, part of our agreement or this contract with EduTech, they would cover that at no additional cost as it comes up. Additionally, I want to point out that several years ago, Leah Horn was appointed as a teacher on special assignment with the intention of serving as a tech integration specialist alongside our classroom teachers. So working more closely with teachers on the development of lesson plans and lesson implementation through the use of various medium, including technology. We believe that this level of support would allow Leah to play more of a role as was intended several years ago, and alleviate some of what have been assigned to her as responsibilities that she was picking up or managing otherwise. So we feel there's a win there and a value add for students and for our faculty as a whole on that end. With that, were there any other questions about the EduTech contract? Okay. And
Well, actually, I'm just going to make a comment.
go ahead. Yep.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Ames Web, and I know that Ames Web was its external organization. It didn't have anything to do with us. It was, it was outside. It just affected us. But, the issue of data security and information security and technology security, those are becoming bigger and bigger issues for municipalities and for districts, right? There are districts that are having to, face that. And so I just think it was very smart for us to think about bringing in that kind of regular day-to-day support, because the technology is changing, the challenges are changing, and so you have the expertise not just of that individual, but of this organization
Right.
that serves, I saw the map, districts all over Westchester and Putnam County, people with 20 years. The guy that started the company, has been doing this for 20 years. He's deeply immersed in all the
Right.
levels. And so I think it's a great investment for us
Right.
to be making. So
I wasn't involved in the bid process. I separate myself from that. But one thing I can say is in the past, when we were considering the creation of this position or increasing the level of support, and in the past as we've maybe encountered issues on campus, when we've reached out to EduTech, they've gone back to us right away when we've had advanced level issues. I have no problem getting in touch with the president of the company, within hours of our contact with them. So I'm happy with the service they've been providing and hope that will continue moving forward. Any other questions on that contract? Just one last comment on item 16, the milk bid. I can say going into the summer, I don't think I was going to spend any time thinking about milk with Ann. But that being said, we were paying attention to this. So historically, we have awarded the bid to Hudson Valley Fresh, and we've been satisfied with their business. However, there was, through the bid process, it was Ann's recommendation to go forward with a separate bid for this year, a different bid. It came in lower, and we felt financially it was the best decision for our school district to recommend that the bid be awarded to Sign-In Farms. Of course, I know it's a community that's very in tune to the health of our kids and the quality of the products that we're serving in our cafeterias. So Ann and I just did Ann looked into the specific elements related to how this milk is produced, which would include how the cows are treated, what, if any, hormones are used in the raising of those cows, the development of those cows, how they are raised on a particular farm that the milk is coming from, where this is being produced, as well as how the product is manufactured and the process for that, to make sure that it's consistent with what we were experiencing in the product or what was occurring with the product we were purchasing before. I should say. And we feel confident that all of those measures are being accounted for in this production, as were in the last production from the company that we were utilizing. So with that, it's important. It's important overall, but I know our community in particular is a little more attuned to that for good reason. And just wanted to make that note in case there were any anticipated questions coming in.
Thank you.
My anticipated question was going to be, I need to come for chocolate milk more often.
There you go. Love chocolate milk.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Consent agenda personnel, may I have a motion, please?
Second.
There's lots on here. It's the mental health team issues that Dr. Benante was talking about earlier. Any questions or comments?
Just wanted to acknowledge this is where Nicole Snook is on the agenda. Nicole's with us this afternoon on a hot August day here at Haldane High School. So I want to welcome Nicole. And as I mentioned, Nicole's mom's here with her. Nicole's mom, not to steal the light from Nicole, but Nicole's mom is a teacher in the Arlington School District. As many of you know, I have some roots there. So a fantastic educator. And I know Nicole is going to be a fantastic educator as well for us here in Haldane. And we're really happy to have you as part of our organization. So it's not official yet, but I just want to make those comments before the board acts.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Nicole. Welcome to Haldane.
Okay, going into new business, CPSE Recommendations. Ms. Femularo?
Recommended action states, be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Approval of our charges to district committees. Ms. Femularo?
Okay, be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby reauthorizes the charges to the following district committees for 2019-2020: Buildings and Grounds, Code of Conduct, Health and Safety, Technology, and Wellness.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Approval of the Haldane School Code of Conduct.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the Haldane School District Code of Conduct for 2019-2020 as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, approval to ratify the execution of the APPR.
Okay, we do this every year. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby ratifies the execution by the Board President and Superintendent of Schools of the 2018-2019 APPR Implementation Certification Form for its annual professional performance review for classroom teachers and building principals covered pursuant to Education Law Section 3012-D and Subpart 30-3 of the Rules of the Board of Regents.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're going into the fund balance conversation. I'll turn it over to Ms. Dinio and Dr. Benante.
I'll defer to Ann.
Okay, so we're just about closed out for the last school year, and changes in fund balance that already occurred in 18-19 were that we used the $415,000 that was reserved from the land sale because our bond anticipation notes were converted into bonds, and that was the original and intended use of those funds. And the vote in May authorized the use of $700,000 from the capital reserve. So when you look at the worksheet, you will see that those changes occurred during the 18-19 school year. As far as fund balance at the end of June for 2019, We have $645,000 appropriated for taxes, which was in our budget that passed. We have our 4%, or maybe just a tad under the 4% for that we like to have every year. And excess funds that are available, I would recommend that we transfer $81,250 to the school lunch fund to take care of the deficit that's on the books as per last year's audit. So it's really been a practice that if there is available fund balance, we take care of last year's school lunch deficit, which unfortunately there always is one. After that, there's $150,000 left. And I know that earlier in the year, was after the governor's executive proposal, we were authorized to develop or establish, the teachers' retirement system retirement reserve as a sub-fund of the retirement contribution reserve, which we've had for years, but that's only for employees' retirement system. Now we're allowed to put some money aside for maybe some spikes in the teachers' retirement system so that we don't have to address that in the budget. I would suggest we put $75,000 in that new reserve to start saving for it. We're nowhere near the cap that's imposed on it. The remaining $75,000, because I had some real close involvement in buildings and grounds this summer, there are some things that came up that weren't addressed, but later on in the year, I think when I have maybe more estimates, we can have more of a conversation about using the repair reserve. There are some things that I really think are important that you take a look at, which is why I am recommending that we put the remaining $75,000 into the repair reserve, and that will take care of all.
And can you just explain why we're usually operating in a deficit in our school lunch fund, correct?
Yes.
Can you explain why?
Most of that deficit is because of the well, first of all, as we know, food is very expensive, but most of our deficit comes from the benefits that we have to give the lunch crew, our cafeteria workers. Not saying that I would want it to be any other way, but it's charged to the school lunch fund so that we have a clear understanding of just what it costs to run their cafeteria. We could easily just charge their health benefits that we give to the cafeteria workers to the general fund, and it would look almost as though it's fine, that there's no loss and probably not much of a gain, if any. But from an auditing standpoint, it's not a true picture. So I charge the school lunch fund for the benefits, thus reducing the benefits in the general fund, and then at the end of the year, we transfer it back through a different way, through fund balance. So it's basically retirement and health insurance and dental insurance that not even all of our cafeteria workers are entitled to based on their contract, but the ones that are entitled to it is basically what makes us have the deficit.
Since you opened up the conversation, are there districts that don't run a deficit in their lunch program, in their meal program? If they account for it in the same way, if they do a fully loaded cost of cafeteria?
I don't know. There
Okay.
could be, my previous district,
Yeah.
we always had a deficit, and that was a very large city district.
Got it.
Where everyone is on free.
Okay.
They don't even, everyone,
Yeah.
they don't even do applications, in small city school
Revenue side
districts.
is different, yeah.
Right. When we increase our lunch prices during the reorg meeting, there's a set calculation that I have to follow to
Yeah.
come up with that. And the most we can increase our lunch prices are 10 cents.
Yeah.
So we have the food prices and even the delivery of the food. And as you see, the milk, it just rises every year. And the benefits keep going up. And we're increasing by
Yeah.
10 cents. It's growing every year. I don't want to say that there's not a cafeteria that's turning a profit,
I'm
but
not sure
they're
that's the
few. They're few and far between.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay.
All right. So it's endemic to it. Okay.
Right.
The other question, because I'll find you offline for another conversation, but so talk me through, so end of year projected revenues and end of year projected expenses, and I know that I assume some of this is transfer from funds, but if you look at the ones that you conveniently highlighted in yellow, we ended up revenue over expenses, which is expenses over revenue. So
We ended up with expenses over revenue because of the uses of the fund balance.
right.
So over $1 million, the 700,000 and the 415 that I talked about at the beginning of my introduction.
Yep.
That is what caused our expenses to exceed the revenues.
Yep.
And when that happens, you go to fund balance
Yep.
or reserves. And we had those reserves for a specific intent.
Yep.
If we did not have the uses of those reserves, then it would be the opposite. We would have more revenue than expense.
Right.
And we'd have more fund balance.
It's always interesting to look up because you have that caveat, which is this was intentional. We made a decision to transfer money out of savings rather than out of we didn't earn any more money to do specific stuff at the school, right?
Right.
Because otherwise you would get to the end of this and you would say, why do we actually have money to incrementally put into the teacher retirement system or the school lunch because we ended up underwater? We didn't, because we thoughtfully transferred money from the savings account. Thank you.
Okay. Are we good? Are we ready to approve this? Ms. Taylor?
Okay. So as it's written. Okay. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the use of excess fund balance for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2019 in the following manner. Transfer to Capital Repair Reserve, $75,000. Transfer to School Lunch Fund, $81,250. Transfer to TRS Retirement Reserve Subfund, $75,000.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, tax rolls.
Okay, and so after I read this resolution, we can do the motion second, all in favor, and then I have to have all of you sign this. So, okay?
It's an all in favor vote, you don't need a roll call.
I don't think I do because you have to sign it.
Okay,
So-
that is the roll call.
Yeah.
Very good.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of School, the Board of Education hereby approves the following resolution to confirm the tax rolls, authorize the tax levy, and approve the tax warrant for the 2019-2020 school year.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sign right now. Sign right now.
Ceremonial.
Yeah, it's happening. I was taxed 23 million, 19 million. You know, people a lot of drinks at Willie's.
Sorry. That is my loss. Too much pressure. I appreciate a good crack.
Thank you.
Very smooth.
Thank you.
Yeah, right across from whenever we.
Okay, is there any communication from the public? All right, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.